Audio check 1 2 check 1 2. Look more this way. This is Tony Martignetti with Gene Takagi, beginning in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%. I'm your aptly named host. This is a special short episode of Nonprofit Radio to meet the needs of nonprofits during the coronavirus pandemic. This is our 4th special episode. Nonprofits and CARES Act. The CARES Act was passed late last week. We're recording on Friday, April 3rd. There are benefits in the act that nonprofits can take advantage of, benefits for your org and your staff, and they're pretty good, so you may want to apply. Plus, there's longer-term relief for nonprofits, nonprofit fundraising. Gene Takagi explains it all. He's our legal contributor and principal of NEO, the Nonprofit and Exempt Organizations Law Group. Gene, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Tony, for allowing me to share information with your audience.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I know you've been, believe me, it is my pleasure. You've been busy all week talking about the CARES Act, I'm sure.
Definitely. Everybody interested in how nonprofits can take advantage, and really thankful that there's some advocacy groups out there that got nonprofits considered in these laws.
Yeah, for sure. Explicitly in some cases. So all your work this week has led you to this pinnacle, to Nonprofit Radio. So it's all led up to here. So thank you for all that preparation that you've been doing to talk to our listeners. Is it best if we you want to start with an overview? I mean, I definitely want to get into the Paycheck Protection Program and the economic injury disaster loans. Do you want to start broader than that before we get in that specific?
Well, I'll just mention that the CARES Act is this $2.2 billion package, and when provisions were put in for small businesses, it was really important to note that nonprofits are out there who are also employers, who are also desperate for assistance at this time, and to have nonprofits put into provisions like the payroll protection program are really important. But this is just part of the legislation that's come down since the coronavirus pandemic has hit us, and our federal government has started paying attention to what needs our country is having right now, desperate needs in many cases. And there was a set of laws called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that dealt with leaves as well, paid leaves by employees. And so that's another component that I hope we get a chance to talk about in addition to the CARES Act.
Okay. All right. So why don't we take care of that? What's the leave provision?
So the leave provision basically apply to, again, small businesses, including nonprofits with less than 500 employees, and it provided for 2 weeks of emergency paid sick leave. Now, sick leave isn't required to be federally, from under federal law to be paid in many cases. Some states do require it, but here's a federal law that required now all small employers, including nonprofits, to provide 2 weeks of emergency paid sick leave. Now, there are some exceptions that might be possible for employers that had less than 50 employees for undue hardship, and for really, really small organizations where that's just not at all possible, that is a standard that they might be able to meet. But generally, this applies to everyone. And the amount of paid sick leave is at the employee's regular rate, up to $511 per day. So it's capped at 10 days or $5,110.
Okay.
And if it is to take care of a child, or because of the child is the one who's sick, or the child needs childcare because their schools have closed because of quarantine rules, then the amount would be the employee's regular rate up to $200 per day. So not the full 511, but it would be actually, I'm sorry, the employer's rate times 2/3. So 2/3 of the employer's rate, or capped at $200 per day for that 10 days. So that's the first section, required paid sick leave.
Okay. Where can we find this in writing somewhere? So, because that's a lot to digest.
Yeah, it's
Where can we see this on the web?
so if you just Google Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the National Council of Nonprofits actually has a good site on that. So that may be a place to look.
Okay, cool. All right.
The other leave that they have is a 12-week of emergency family and medical leave. And basically it's a 10-week add-on to the 2 weeks that you originally had, but this is only for care of family members. Again, childcare, if there's a sick child due to the coronavirus, or their school got quarantined and childcare is required to be provided.
Does it
So
have to
that's
be, does it have to be childcare? Could it be care of someone else in the family that's not a child?
it could be another dependent. I believe that's provided a family member.
Dependent. Okay, but that wouldn't be a parent then, unless the parent was a dependent.
I don't know that
Isn't
parents are
that clear?
included. We'll have to wait to see if the regulations
Okay.
spell that out.
Okay.
And that's an additional 10 weeks, and again,
Right.
to the 12 weeks, sorry, to the 2 weeks that's in the original act. And that's at 2/3 of each employee's usual pay, up to $200 per day. Now, this is a huge burden on employers, right? All of a sudden, if they hadn't been required to pay leave before, now they're required to pay leave, and obviously a lot of employers are going to be cash strapped now if their businesses have closed and things. So these are not available if the workplace is completely closed down. And the other thing to know, that employers can recoup these costs through a payroll tax credit. So details kind of in the regulations or in some of the sites, including the National Council of Nonprofit sites I mentioned, but employers can recoup these costs. Employees are getting paid sick leave under these provisions. So that was one of the immediate laws that came out.
When you say the workplace must be closed, you mean the organization shut down. You don't mean the office closed, do you? Or do you?
If the office is closed and the employees are unable to perform their jobs from home. So if
unable to perform and unable to work from home. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Because of the caregiving that they're providing. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Can we go to the SBA loans? Okay. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's probably critical.
Okay. Yes. I wanted to make sure we exhausted this other information that you had. I want to say, just to get started, the SBA site, sba.gov, is very, very simple. I think I was able to understand it. SBA.gov, and then you'll be looking at this basketball-sized picture of a coronavirus. You can't possibly miss it on the site, and you just click in there to learn more. And then you just scroll right down to coronavirus funding options. And then a page opens up with a lot of what it'll cover what Gene and I are about to talk about: the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And then there's a couple of others too. So it's really very, very helpful, I think, the SBA site. SBA.gov. Can we start with the Paycheck Protection Program, Gene? Now that's also only for employers of 500 or fewer, right? Employees?
Yeah, fewer than 500 employees, including nonprofits. So really a big point to add that nonprofits are eligible for this. And agreed that this is an important provision. $349 billion was dedicated towards this. And on the date that we're recording this, Tony, is the first day that the application theoretically was released. But these loans are available from SBA lenders. That would include most FDIC insured banks, but not all of these institutions are ready to implement this, even though the application theoretically came out today. And one of the concerns that everybody's having on day one is that the regulations just came out as an interim rule last night.
Yeah, I saw that just Thursday, just last night, something came out. Yeah.
And while the application and the SBA site makes it look easy, there are a lot of unanswered questions or ambiguities that is making the lenders have a problem to implement this. Some people are guessing all of the loans are going to run out on day one because $349 billion sounds like a lot, but if you say every small business in the country is eligible to take this, and every small nonprofit, there's only so much that money's going to last. And there's a question about whether the lenders are going to prefer their own clients, so their existing clients that have loans with the organizations. Are they going to prefer the larger clients because they value their business, for which the banks are going to reap some sort of reward over time? Are they going to value them ahead of the small nonprofit that's coming in? So my best advice is to try to go in to your own bank, find out if they are an SBA lender, and make your case to them as quickly as possible. I don't know that everything will be depleted on day one. That might be a worst case scenario. I believe Wells Fargo Bank is not started yet because of issues with implementation. So there are going to be problems getting this rolling, but once it rolls, the money's not going to last very long. So I would say, to the extent you can, get your paperwork together very quickly. The SBA site lets you know kind of what type of paperwork is required for this, and there's not a lot. It's not like a traditional loan as well, Tony. I guess that's maybe the first thing I should have pointed out.
They've relaxed some of the requirements, and they've really streamlined the application, especially for this. I know for myself, well, we'll get to the economic injury loan, but just from one day to the next, the economic injury loan, the application went from like 4 different forms you had to fill out last Sunday night to Monday, when it was just streamlined, like 2 or 3. It was like there was 3 screens. You just had to pick selections and make a bunch of certifications, and you were done. And it was much more burdensome just the day before.
Yeah, and these things have been changing on the fly.
Yeah.
The Paycheck Protection Program, I mean, the best scenario about this that nonprofits need to know, which maybe I shouldn't have hidden the ball or hit the ball at the start.
We're all figuring it out. That's okay.
Is why it's so great if you can access it is it's a loan that's forgivable, meaning that it's essentially a grant. So it's a loan that you're going to make, and then if you keep up your payroll force, you pretty much get to recoup all of it back. And that's a huge thing, right? To be able to keep your work staff on. So that's the big point. And
the details of that are in the on that SBA site that I was suggesting people go to. It says, if you haven't kept everybody, you have to rehire everybody, I think by June 20th or June 30th of this year. But the details are on the SBA site, and it's in plain language. It's really pretty simple to understand what you're committing to. But even if you're not able to keep up your workforce and not have it converted to a grant, at least it's a very favorable loan.
Right. It's 0.5% interest, so less than 0.5%.
And interest. Deferred. Interest is deferred for the first 6 months.
Correct. And due on 2 years right now, although there very likely could be an extension, and we may see variations of this, and hopefully more appropriations of more money should they run out of this amount. I'm pretty sure the federal government knows that this is still phase 1, and there are going to be additional phases necessary on an individual level as well as on an entity level.
Yeah. All right. Anything more you want to add about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program?
Sure. So let's talk about what the loan is for, and that's exactly what it refers to: payroll, to paying your payroll. But it also includes utilities, interest on your mortgage, not the principal on your mortgage, but interest on your mortgage, and rent. So and utilities. So some occupancy costs and employee costs, and generally the amount of the loan is going to be determined by 2.5 months, essentially, 2.5 times the average totally monthly payroll costs, based on a 1 year, or I'm sorry, based on the last year, a test period
Right.
in that time. So 2.5 times monthly payroll costs. So that's something to think about as being a huge help at this time.
Yeah, that's 10 weeks worth of payroll, plus those other expenses that you mentioned.
Correct.
Interest on mortgages, utilities, etc.
And no collateral, no personal guarantees, not like other SBA loans. So as long as you're under 500 employees, there are a few other qualifications. Some of them I'm not so happy about, but if you've got a criminal record or anything,
Yeah.
even an indictment, you don't qualify for it. Not even a conviction there, just an indictment. So it's interesting formulas that were come up with that. I'm sure there was a lot of haggling on the floor to get something up quickly, but that's what we have. That there are a lot of details in this. One area of confusion that I mentioned, Tony, and that's maybe creating a little bit of headaches for banks and lenders, and also for organizations that are trying to share information about this, including me, is what about independent contractor costs? So we talked about payroll, and payroll, from a legal or accounting standpoint, we're talking about employees, right? But
Yeah.
what about the nonprofits that are paying people as independent contractors? And my understanding, and based on the interim rule that came out last night from the SBA, that payroll costs do not include independent contractor costs, although I'm seeing conflicting information from independent sector and the the National Council of Nonprofits right now about that issue, and partly because the application refers to, do you have employees or independent contractors that are reported as 1099s? That's what the application says, which would lead
Yeah.
you to think that if you can have either or, that there must be some benefit if you have independent contractors that you're paying as well. But part of my rationale in thinking that the SBA interim rule is probably right on this issue is that independent contractors, even sole proprietorships, can apply for this loan, forgivable loan program, the payroll protection program themselves. So they don't have to rely on a hiring entity to do it for them. They can apply for it directly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we're a little confusion there, not absolutely clear. I don't think any of us can say with 100% that we know the truth.
So at this stage, then, are you best leaving independent contractors out of your calculation of payroll for purposes of the PPP, just so that you don't muddy up your application with a possible problem that would hold it up, and then knowing that maybe you can go back when you get further guidance if you are using a lot of 1099 contractors?
I think this is going to be processed very quickly, and
You think they're going to gloss over issues like this in the beginning and
very
back and
possibly
clean up later?
Yeah, very possibly. The problem with including the 1099 contractors may be twofold. One is that if they weren't intended to be included, will the government say that's not going to be forgivable? And is your budgeting based on, considering these grants rather than loans? And it very well could be that if you report independent contractors, they may just say, nope, this isn't forgivable. The whole thing is a loan. That's one consideration. And I don't think, as nonprofits think about this and the limited amount of money that's available, they shouldn't count on this. They should definitely apply for it as quickly as possible.
Right.
But they shouldn't 100% count on it being available for them.
available and forgivable.
And forgivable.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
correct. That's a really
Okay.
important
Okay.
point.
All
The
right. So
second thing,
balance these things as you're doing your application. Maybe get the advice from a board member, certainly legal counsel if you have that. But don't I don't think you should let these potential problems hang you up and not participate. Get your application in. You might decide not to include your 1099 contractors. Maybe that's a decision you make, but get it in at least for your payroll, your payroll folks, your employees, so that you can be covered for 10 weeks of payroll. I mean, that's valuable. Get the darn thing in, make a decision and get it in one way or the other.
yeah, and have all
I
the
think.
material available, including your independent contractor information available. They're asking for it in the application. So your bank
Okay.
will probably help determine whether they'll include that in the
Okay.
loan or not. But just bring it all in. Get your paperwork ready. I know everybody's inundated with work that's trying to keep things together. Leaders are, and this is worth the time.
Yeah, it's 10 weeks of payroll. I mean,
Yeah,
that's a long time.
it's huge. So you've got to
Yeah.
put other things aside to get this done and get it done as early as possible.
Yeah, because of
yeah.
what you were talking about, the money. All right.
Get it ready early next week if you can.
Let's move to the EIDL. I hate jargon. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This is different. This is other types of expenses, Gene.
Yeah, so it's a working capital loan essentially. So it can be used for payroll, but if you can't apply for both and put the same use for both. So if you ask for a payroll protection program loan, you can't also ask for an EIDL loan for the same reason. But you could ask for a different reason, for working capital in other business costs that you're going to have. And again, this is designed for small businesses and small nonprofits, but there's only $10 billion that's allocated here. So it's a lot less than the other program, but go ahead and apply for it as early as possible.
Now, this has a great feature, a $10,000 advance on the loan, and that can be forgivable.
Right, and that's
if you get turned down.
Right, even if you get turned down, whether you get accepted or not, the $10,000 is yours to keep.
Oh, it's whether you get turned down. Oh, even if you're approved for the loan, the $10,000 advance is still forgivable. Is that right?
I believe it does not need to be repaid in either case.
Okay.
It's my understanding of it.
And they're saying that this is going to hit your bank within 3 to 5 days of your application. Now, I already applied for my business more than 3 days ago, and I haven't gotten. It hasn't been quite 5 business days. It's been 4, and I haven't seen it yet. So don't be wedded to the 3 to 5 days. It's because they do ask for your bank account. They ask for your account number. They ask for your routing number. So they are intending to deposit this $10,000 advance quickly, but you may not get it within the 3 to 5 days. But it is forgivable, and it is an advance on the loan, so it comes fast, and then the loan consideration is a longer term process.
Right. So it gets paid without them processing the loan at all. I mean, it just gets paid based on the application, which is fantastic. Again, really something to take advantage of, but limited funds. So go in as early as possible. It's great, Tony, that you went in very early. People should do that again early next week. And this is separate from the Paycheck Protection Program, but if you do get accepted for the forgiveness of loan under the first act, the Paycheck Protection Program that we talked about, that $10,000 under this EIDL will be counted against the cap on that. So just note that you can't double dip here.
Okay.
But the loan interest rate is 2.75%. And the maximum term is 30 years. It's going to be dependent upon your credit worthiness. So it follows more standard procedures than the Paycheck Protection Loan, which again, doesn't matter what your credit is. Doesn't matter if you have outstanding loans or not. The first one that we talked about, the forgivable loans. But this one is, a
little tighter requirements, lending requirements, more typical than what they waived for the payroll protection.
Correct.
Okay. Anything you want to add about economic injury disaster loan, the EIDL? Again, this is all very clearly laid out. Big pictures on the SBA.gov website. Anything else?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just say that it's available also for debt payment. So your ongoing business expenses, including debt payment.
Okay. So we got some longer term relief regarding the charitable income tax, the federal charitable income tax deduction that we, in the tax and, well, I forget the formal name, Tax and Jobs Act. There was a reduction in it took away an incentive for non-itemizers to make charitable gifts.
Yeah,
And we've seen some hit there because the vast majority? It's the majority of people do not itemize their taxes. But we got some relief.
so the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from a
Thank
couple
you.
years
Tax
ago.
Cuts and Jobs Act. Thank you.
From a couple years ago, raised the standard deduction, almost doubling it. The impact of that is it left about 8% of the taxpayers as itemizers. So it's a very, very small portion that actually get the benefit of a charitable contribution deduction, because the charitable contribution deduction is one of the itemized deductions that you get. So more than 90% of taxpayers get no tax benefit for making a charitable contribution deduction until this act, until the CARES Act came into play. Now, this is only a one-year provision, but I hope it's a precursor for a change in the law to allow for a universal deduction so that there's more equity across every taxpayer for getting some sort of benefit for making a charitable contribution deduction. So now it looks like it's only applicable to those generally who are a little bit more wealthier than others that have the ability to itemize taxes, their deductions, and get a tax benefit from that. And this above the line deduction, how accountants refer to it, is for $300. So anybody who makes a contribution can get $300 off if it's to a qualifying charity. And some of the big charities that do not qualify, donor advised funds, that's kind of an important one to note. So donor advised funds typically used by a little bit more wealthier individual that would tend to itemize taxes, their tax returns, but that will not qualify, and that helps to get the money into the stream of operating charities quicker than those that are sort of keeping funds in accounts for years without a payment provision.
I'm hoping that $300 will increase in the future. But at least, like, as you said, it's a start. It's $300 up to $300 per taxpayer, and it's just for this year, 2020, so that anyone, itemizing or not, can get at least that much, $300 removed from, exempt from your taxable income. Or, well, I'm getting into the weeds about how it's calculated. Let's not go there. You get a federal charitable income tax deduction if you're a non-itemizer, up to $300. So that's something that when you are making your fundraising messaging again, because we will get back to that, there will be times when there'll be the right time for you to talk about your needs and how your donors can help you fill these maybe even these especially critical and unbudgeted needs. You can make it clear that non-itemizers among your donors can get a federal income tax charitable deduction for up to $300. That may move some people.
I think there was an op-ed, I can't remember if it was in the Chronicle of Philanthropy or not, earlier this week, Tony, that talked about the need to give to smaller charities at this time. Those are the ones that are going to be really struggling. And if you really value a small charity, this $300 deduction that you wouldn't have received before, maybe just what, tips some people over to helping the small charities. And I'm hoping that that's true. I'm not sure what type of impact this will have for most people who are probably very fearful right now about where their income is coming from. A lot of unemployment going on right now, and there's some CARES Act provisions that deal with unemployment that we can talk about too. But it's a scary time, but there will be a time when we're back fundraising.
Yeah, of
And
course.
this is going to be important, as is the case for a little bit of the wealthier taxpayer that is capped by the amount of deductions they can take for charitable contribution. And the traditional cap had been 50% of their adjusted gross income. And if it was a cash donation, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act said 60% of your adjusted gross income was your cap of how much you could take for charitable contribution deduction. So if you made $100,000 in adjusted gross income that you were going to report to the IRS, you could take up to a $50,000, or if it was a cash contribution to a charity, $60,000 deduction off that amount. That was the limitation. This year, that limit is gone. So if you wanted to donate $100,000 of your $100,000 in adjusted gross income, you could just take a deduction for the full amount.
Yeah, and this is a provision that's mostly for the wealthy.
Absolutely.
Very few donors bump up against the limitations against their adjusted gross income in their charitable deductions. That it's not very common.
Right.
But we got some relief. All right.
Yeah, for older people who may not make very much in income anymore, that's maybe the primary beneficiary of this, to the extent that they have still disposable income to provide for charitable giving.
Okay. All right, we're gonna leave it there, Gene. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. I want to thank you very much for doing this. I usually give you a lot more notice to put a show together. So thank you very much for helping with this special episode, because I know it helps our listeners. That's really the key. Thanks, Gene.
Thanks so much, Tony.
And I want to remind listeners that we're sponsored by Wegner CPAs, guiding you beyond the numbers. WegnerCPAs.com, by Cougar Mountain Software. Denali Fund is their complete accounting solution made for nonprofits. Tony.ma/Cougar Mountain for a free 60-day trial. And by Turn2 Communications, PR and content for nonprofits. Your story is their mission. Turn-2.co. Our creative producer is Claire Meyerhoff. Sam Leibowitz is the line producer. The show's social media is by Susan Chavez. Mark Silverman is our web guy. And the music is by Scott Stein of Brooklyn. Many thanks to Sam, Susan, and Mark for helping me get this special episode out to you quickly. And of course, to Gene as well for your time on the fly, Gene. Thank you. Be with me next time for Nonprofit Radio, big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%. Stay safe and be great.
But baby, just keep on talking. Sooner or later, I'll figure out just what you mean. You're seeking romantic advice from a billboard. I'm looking for answers up on a TV screen. And we can't